Okay, this week you're going to be working on the rough draft of your Have You Ever assignment. The Have You Ever assignment ends up is going to be your first writing assignment for the semester. And this week I want you to really focus on the fact that this is going to be a rough draft. Now, for a rough draft, the few things that you need to know. This does need to be a fully completed essay. And when I say fully completed, I mean it needs to have a beginning, a middle, and end, and all the sections that are required. It needs to meet the full word count. And then two, with this rough draft, we're going to go through some peer revision starting next week. And so you're going to have some opportunity to improve this paper before it's finally graded. But at the same time, you want to make work on developing a draft that you're prepared to share with some of your peers in the class. And then thirdly, or third, with this rough draft, is that it needs to be fully typed. And obviously, if you want to get credit for the rough draft, it needs to be typed and turned in on time. So make sure that you on time. Make sure that you follow along pretty carefully with all of the due dates and the processes that are going to be required in order to turn this in. I'll also be posting a separate short video on turn-in procedures. I know many of you have probably never used the Dropbox and desire to learn, so I'll spend some time showing you in a separate video how to do that. So if you're confused or you have questions, feel free to check out that video. Now, I'm also available this week to spend some time video conferencing with you if you have any questions. And so if you want to end up scheduling a video conference, just send me an email, and in that email, obviously include your name, maybe some times that'll work for you. And what we can do is we can use the Google Hangouts, and I can go through and walk you through any steps or help you with anything that you might need some assistance with. So realize that you have that available to you this week. All right, so let's move on. And what I want to do now is I want to show you and talk about some of the things to consider while you're drafting your Have You Ever assignment. So the first thing that we need to think about is that this is a personal narrative. You've read about narrative writing, you've read some examples of narrative writing, and now it's time for you to kind of practice your own style of narrative writing. And so narrative writing has a few things that you need to think about. And the first one that we're going to talk about here is chronological order. And you need to think about the chronological ordering of the events that you have chosen. So you're going to take one of your Have You Ever ideas, and one of those ideas you're going to develop into obviously a narrative paper. Now this is a fairly short narrative paper. The requirement on the assignment says 1,200 words. 1,200 words ends up being, I don't know if any of you know, but an average page of typed text includes around 300 to maybe 350 words. So we're talking about maybe a 3.5, 4-page paper here, give or take, 3.5 to 4 pages roughly, and maybe even a little shorter. So this isn't a terribly long paper by college standards. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to carefully decide which events are you going to end up talking about here, because you're not going to have all that much time once you get writing to actually include too many events. So the events that you include and kind of the structure that you put them, or the timeline that you create, if you like a linear timeline here and you want to think about the beginning and the end, you got to think about what can I fit in here, because I can't fit too much and still go into some good detail. Now, I will forewarn you, one of the worst types of Have You Ever papers I frequently encounter here are the dreaded vacation Have You Evers. Now, the reason being is because of vacation Have You Ever. Most people try to start at the beginning of their vacation and the end, and this ends up taking about 7, maybe 10 days, 5 days, something like that. And it's really just too much to try to pack in. You're going to try to take one scene, one situation, one event, and you're going to turn this into your Have You Ever paper. And so there's one situation, 7 days is far too much. An entire book could be written about 7 days. And so make sure that whatever paper you end up writing or paper topic you end up going with, that you make sure that you really plan this out and you think about what your chronological sequencing is going to be. For example, I did have a vacation story that was pretty good. I had a student who was going on a vacation, and he was going on a vacation with one of his best friends from school. And his best friend's dad decided that they're going to take their big boat. And it looks like a boat. I'll put it on a trailer here. And they were going to hook that boat up, and they were going to take it down to the Florida Keys to go snorkeling and fishing. And what ended up happening is that his dad decided to stack, because gas down in the Keys is really expensive, a whole bunch of gas tanks in the back of the boat for the drive down. This is when I was teaching in Florida. So they all got into the family car, and you can see I'm an excellent illustrator here, and they all jump in here and they're driving down the road in the family car heading to Florida. And all of a sudden, they look back on the interstate. And when they look back on the interstate, the boat is on fire and it is blowing. It was about a 25, 30-foot boat. And I guess the flames were reaching back 40 or 50 feet behind the rig as they're driving down the road. And so the student of mine, he wrote about the entire paper encapsulated about 5 minutes. When the parents and the father specifically learned that the boat was burning, and they quickly pulled off to the side of the road, and the boat then ended up, it was so hot, it ended up catching the truck on fire, and they're standing on the side of the road, and they have about this 50 or 60-foot just wall of fire on the side of the interstate. And so his entire paper took 5 minutes. He didn't even deal with the people, the rescue trucks getting there, or the fire trucks getting there. He merely wrote for 5 minutes about the conversations and the yelling and the shouting between all the family members, and the trucks burning and the boats burning. That took up his entire paper. So really, what I'm trying to get at here with this example is try to think about what kind of chronological sequencing you want, because you don't have a lot of space here. And so avoid, breaking that vacation. If you did a 7-day vacation, you don't even have a paragraph for each day. It ends up being a little slow, a little goofy. So, you might want to think about, you have your have you ever list, but you're not locked into that. You can make some more topics up. Other ones, some people have used maybe the final conversation they had with a loved one, a grandfather, a grandmother, something like that, or maybe a fight with a friend, or some of these have you ever experiences might not seem as significant in the grand scheme of things, but when it comes right down to it and you start writing about them, they turn out to be pretty powerful narrative stories. And so think about chronology before you start. Okay, the next one, let's move on here. The next thing that I want to spend some time talking about and thinking about down here is your dialogue. Remember that last week we spent some time working on dialogue, and so this week, when you write your narrative paper, I want you to have some dialogue between characters. I'm looking for roughly half a page of dialogue between the different characters that you create within your story. And in order for your dialogue, remember the example that we used with the boy and the psychology student interviewing the boy. We need some good background knowledge. And the background knowledge, you need to show us the characters and not just simply tell us about the characters. Who are these people? Why are they important? What do they look like? What are they wearing? What's their posture like? What are their physical movements like? And so give some background and show some setting here. And so this, I guess, would be more setting. And then you also need, you don't forget to use some of those active verbs. And like I said, I'm looking for about half a page of active dialogue between characters. Now, I have had students who have included a lot more than half a page, and if you're really into writing dialogue and you want more than half a page, that's great. That's kind of stands as a minimum. So don't forget dialogue. Okay, the next thing that we need to talk about here is APA style. Now, this paper, I'm not going to be overly concerned about APA style, but APA style is going to be, some of you are probably familiar with MLA, but MLA is obviously different than APA. For the course of this, for using it for this course, for Writing 101, we're going to be using APA. APA is slowly becoming a more commonly used citation style. I always ended up using MLA in college, but more and more classes are requiring APA. So I'm going to instruct you all on APA over the course of the semester. This is going to be a link. This is a narrated PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to include this link in the course content, so go through it. One thing that you don't need to have, most papers require an abstract at the beginning. For this narrative paper, I'm not going to require an abstract. We will in future papers, but for this one you won't. So basically, pay attention to the title page and what the title page looks like, and then pay attention to your headers and your header material. And so when you're looking at an APA, you'll see this in the narrated version up here that you're going to watch. But up here is going to be the title of the paper plus a page number. Make sure you pay attention to that. And on the title page, which would be your first page, there's going to be some information right in the center. Try to format this properly. Try to format this properly. If there's some minor mistakes with it, it's not going to be a big deal this time, but we are going to be working towards perfection with APA. So pay attention to it and take the time to work your way through this APA style guide. If you have any questions, you can also go to OWL. I'll post a link to it. This isn't the exact link, but it's owl.com. It's the University of Purdue's Writing Center. They've got a lot of good resources there. In fact, I'm not even sure if it's a .com. It might be .org, I believe, but I'll post that for you. Okay, moving on here to the next thing. So don't forget APA style. The next thing that I want to talk about is your beginning. The beginning of your paper. This goes for all papers that you write in the future, not just this one. But the beginning is a very important aspect of the paper. Remember, think about your instructor sitting in this chair, and obviously in this case your instructor is me, but in your future classes your instructor is sitting there at their desk and they are reading hundreds and hundreds of papers. In this case it's going to be on a computer screen here, and they'll be typing comments to you. And your instructors are going to be writing and writing and reading and reading and reading. And when you're in a college level class, it's important that whatever you write, that you grab your reader's attention right off the bat. Grab that attention, make it interesting from the beginning. Don't start off with cliches. Cliches is something that's overused and abused. You don't want to start off with a cliche. It was a dark and stormy night, or there's a don't call the that's the pot calling the kettle black. Some of these overused statements, you definitely need to avoid the cliche. You don't want to use those, but you need to grab your reader's attention with something interesting. Think about starting your writing right in the beginning of maybe a clinching scene in your Have You Ever story, and then go back and give them some information later that's further on in the story. So I can show you an example of this. I didn't say that very clearly. And so let's imagine that this is your chronological sequencing. This is your story. And let's say the most interesting part of your story, I'll get another color here. Let's say this right here is the most interesting chunk of your story, but you might have some background information that you need here. Don't be locked into, when I say chronological, you do need to have a complete narrative cycle, but you might want to start here and have this be the first part of your story to grab your reader's attention. And then maybe from here, you come back in this, you then get this part, and this is the second part of your story. And then from here, you then skip ahead to the end and you pick up the third part of your story. And so think about how you can really grab your reader's attention at the very beginning. That's an important piece. Okay, and that goes for any style of writing that you're going to be doing. Okay, now the next thing and the last thing that I want to talk about for just a minute, because I'm running out of time here, is the end. And the ending is important in this too. Now this is a narrative event. This is something that's happened to you. This is a have you ever. Have you ever, I presume these to be fairly significant events in your life. They don't have to be earth-shattering, but at the end, I want you to talk about what have you learned from this event. What was learned? What did you take away from it? Was there a moral? Did you learn something about friendship? Did you learn something about planning, kind of life planning? Why, basically the question that I'm going to ask is, why was this event important? Because you're obviously sharing this with the world, so for some reason it was important, and I want you to clearly identify that at the end of your paper. And so this is kind of basically the end. This is what you should be thinking about in your conclusion. All right. Good luck, and if you have any questions, make sure you get a hold of me.